Welcome to the Cinema Australia podcast with Matthew Eales.
We're all fucking traumatized. I've seen people drown. I've dug graves. Some days I'm still on the roof, hearing the screams. Of course, we have floods, but not like this. This is catastrophic.
White fellas came down and put all their houses in a flood zone. Can you imagine the old fellas? They must have been having a good old laugh.
It does make you feel more attached to a place going through something so traumatic.
Just exhausted. Just really hanging on by a thread here, and I think a lot of people are.
Our climate, as we know, is changing.
Affluent people have that luxury to not feel like you're ever going to get flooded. Makes me wonder whether I'll ever be able to get out of the floodplain and be safe.
This has just been home for so long.
That's the trailer for Floodland. Hello and welcome to the Cinema Australia podcast. My name is Matthew Eales. In this episode, I'm joined by Floodland director Jordan Giusti to discuss this very topical documentary set in flood-prone Lismore, where residents face life-changing decisions after devastating floods. A man copes pragmatically, his friend turns activist, and an Indigenous social worker builds a healing centre. Jordan is an award-winning director based in Naarm, Melbourne. Prior to Floodland, Jordan completed numerous short films, including Grevillea and Reptile, which we also discuss here. Jordan is also a two-time Australian Directors Guild Awards nominee for his short film work and has had notable festival screenings. As regular Cinema Australia readers and listeners will know, I usually publish my interviews prior to a film's release, but I was a bit late with this one as I've been on WA-made film festival duties over here in Perth. Floodland is screening at some cinema locations still, so be sure to check out the film's website to find out where you can see it. Just a quick note here, if you do hear a dog howling very briefly throughout this interview, I accidentally ran over my dog's tail with my office chair while we were recording. I can assure you the dog's fine, but I listened back on this interview twice and for the life of me I cannot find where that particular soundbite is. So if you do hear it, just to let you know again, he's fine. Anyway, enjoy. Jordan, thank you for joining the Cinema Australia podcast. It's great to have you on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on Floodland. I first caught the film at Cinefest Oz last year, then most recently while preparing for this interview. My reaction to the film on each occasion was different in that on my first viewing, I was moved emotionally because of the film's devastating human focus. And then on my second viewing, I found it to be more shocking on an environmental and political level. To me, Floodland really is the complete package when it comes to documentary filmmaking, and other filmmakers looking to explore this genre would really be doing themselves a favour by referencing your film. So congratulations again on this one.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
We were talking off air just then about Floodland's festival run, and it really has had an almighty run on the Australian festival circuit over the past year. How have you found the reaction to the film to be on a personal level by people viewing it?
Oh, well, I mean, it's, I think whenever you make a film, there's always a bit of nerves around how people will receive it, just because by nature of making a film, I think there's always a sense of, there can always be a sense of doubt, like, is it going to read? Is it going to connect with people? And I mean, the response has just been so overwhelming that, I've just been so pleased that, people have really responded to the film. I think that's kind of all you really want at the end of the day. So it's been great.
Has the film screened in Lismore yet? Have locals seen it?
It has, yeah. We had a screening for the community in advance of the theatrical release. I believe it was in November, and yeah, that was a really special screening. I mean, that was really the biggest screening I had, while making the film in my mind. That would be the most important one when the community sees it for the first time. And yeah, it was really special to be there and to we did a Q&A there with a lot of the participants in the film, and to not just see the reaction, but the conversations we had afterwards. I thought was so productive, and it was sort of a dream, to be honest. It's sort of the reason I wanted to make the film, was to, hopefully make the community feel seen and their stories told, and also to start a dialogue about where to go next.
Obviously, we're going to take a deep dive into the making of the film in a moment, but just talk us through that particular screening, and the emotion in the room, and how it was received by the locals. What were people saying to you after the screening?
Yeah, well, I think understandably, it's a very difficult film for a lot of people in Lismore to see, because it is such a devastating story, and to relive it for a lot of people, I think. It can be quite painful, but we were really lucky. So Carly's in the film, and through the people she had working with her at the Healing Hub were present to really be there in case people need to step out of the screening. So I was with her and waiting in the lobby of the cinema, and every now and again someone would walk out because it'd be a very difficult scene, and luckily Carly and Ruth was there as well, who she works with, and they were there to really provide that support for people. And oftentimes, because of them, people were able to, sort of talk about the emotions they were going through, and then ended up being able to go back into the screening. So it was a really incredible response, to see and to be able to support people through, or for Carly to be able to support that, was really special. And then I think at the end of the screening, there was just, it was a very emotional reaction, but also a very galvanizing one. I think a lot of people were very much, had a lot to say. I think it's a real conversation starter for Lismore, particularly. So, yeah, the emotions were very high, but it was also very energetic, I think. So, yeah.
We will talk a little bit about the participants in this film as well, as far as Eli Harper, Carly Jensen, and Jess go. But have they been joining Q&A panels? Have they been a part of these screenings? And are they comfortable talking about the film with an audience? Because as you just said there, I could imagine it being, quite exhausting having to relive these traumas over and over.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so amazing that they've all participated in those Q&As, and been a really big part of the release of the film, and have really taken ownership over it, or co-ownership, which has just added a whole other layer to the film. I think, like, it's not just screening it, but to have them there, and for people to engage in a conversation with them, and for them to go even deeper about their experiences, both within the film but also after the film, that you don't get to see. So they've been really amazing at just really being enthusiastic about taking part in that, and expanding on what the film touches on.
So before we get stuck into Floodland, I want to go back to the beginning of your filmmaking career for a moment. You're based in Naarm, Melbourne. Is that where you grew up?
Yes, it is.
Talk to us about growing up in Melbourne and the filmmaking community, that you surrounded yourself with while growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I went to Swinburne, did the diploma of screen and media, and then the advanced diploma, and really, that's where I met Benita, who's the DP of this film, and met a lot of other people who, were sort of there to help me make a lot of the projects that I did after film school. And also very early on in my career, I had the opportunity to work very closely with Amiel Corton-Wilson. And those early years really, I think, were quite formative for me, and being able to witness the way that Amiel works on projects, which is so unique and so passionate, and such a high degree of work ethic and standard for his work, that it really set the tone for me, I think, early on of, I suppose what it takes to be a filmmaker in Australia, and how to make that work. And I think through that the knowledge that I gained through working with him and some of the other amazing people I met while working with Amiel. That's where I met Chris Luskery, who ended up producing my short films that ended up having, was really fortunate to have festival success with them, like Grevillea going to the Berlinale or traveling with my other short film Reptile to Sitges in Spain. And so that was sort of how I suppose filmmaking grew, was really through all those experiences. And every one of those short films had an element of documentary fiction hybrid to it. So I'd work a lot with first-time actors and work with them to craft narratives around their own personal lives and bring their own lived experiences to fictional short-form narratives. And so, but working with Amiel, because he's a very talented documentary filmmaker as well as working in the hybrid space. I think that backing and that foundation made me more confident engaging with Floodland, which is my first true documentary project. Which makes it quite ambitious. I mean, to have my first documentary be a feature-length project, it's obviously very, it's a big swing, but
it is.
But I like to think it worked out.
In what capacity were you working with Amiel? Because I'm such a fan of his work, and Man on Earth, which was one of his most recent documentaries, was a huge standout for me. In what capacity were you working with him?
I was working as a co-producer on his project Carnation, and was there for the development of Man on Earth as well,
Yes.
Which is really special to see. The way that film came together and the way that Amiel approached that was, it was super inspiring to see. Just it grew very quickly, and then it very quickly became such a special project, and obviously that's plain to see now that it's been released and had the reception that it's had.
From what I've learnt over a decade of interviewing filmmakers, the filmmaking community in Melbourne can be both a tight-knit one and a competitive one at the same time. How would you describe that from your perspective?
I always felt it was a bit of a family. Like I sort of, I think a lot of my collaborators I met through my time working with Amiel, and it always just felt very like there was so much cross-pollination, and it was a really, fertile environment, that there was so many different projects being made and so many people jumping on board in different capacities. And, I started as, in a producer capacity working with Amiel, and then moved into directing, and then Chris Luskery produced a lot of my shorts, and now he's directing. It was just very alive and creative, and I didn't find too much of this competitiveness or anything like that. It just felt like everyone was supporting each other, and you sort of need that. I think, especially in a place like Australia, it's such a small industry that I think the only way to really elevate it is if we all rise the tide and all the boats float together. So that was my experience.
Yeah, it's the only way we can make it work. You mentioned producing there and directing. How did you settle on one over the other? Did you originally set out to be a producer or a director? How did you settle on this?
I found producing, I think I always wanted to be a director, but I enjoyed producing, and I felt it was a great way to get involved with projects, and a great way to learn from, in the case of Amiel, a very talented director, and to be very close to that process. And so it was me enjoying that process, but also learning a lot, and eventually moving more towards directing work through my short films.
Would you recommend that to other emerging filmmakers to, make sure that you're covering all bases rather than just the one?
I think in some ways, I was lucky. I did it when I was very young, so I had a lot of time to really invest in learning in that way. But I think through the process, I also learned that it's very like, for instance, I edit as well, and it's great to be sort of what's the word, like multi-hyphenate with your skills. But I also think I have found, and it is understandable, that a lot of people in the industry, once they hear you being in a certain role, they only have the space in their brain to hold that one version of you.
Yes.
It's a bit difficult to be at a film festival and say, I'm here as a producer with a short film. So I actually produced another short film that I went to Clermont-Ferrand with another filmmaker, Louis Atty, in 2019. And there was a lot of conversations like, oh, you're the producer of this short film. I was like, yes, I do, but I also direct. And it sort of became a very awkward conversation. I sort of realized, you almost need to pick a role and really hang your hat on that. And it doesn't mean you can't do the other stuff, but I think there is value in focusing in on what role specifically and really diving into it. And yeah, picking whatever that role is that works for you would be my advice, and going for it.
Yeah, so would you say that you've now hung your hat on directing?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Both of your previous short films, Reptile and Grevillea, were both successful, having been selected for international festivals and winning awards. Talk to us a bit about those films and their backgrounds for people who haven't seen them.
Yeah, so I'll start with Grevillea, which was a project that I was writing around the time I was working with Amiel and meeting Crystal Screw there and talking to him about it, and ended up making it with him, which was set in a youth justice center, which I was reading a lot about at the time. That environment in newspaper articles and doing a lot of research. And I had an uncle that had worked in one of the youth detention centers, the Parkville one specifically. And so my head was in that space, and I wanted to write a narrative about that. And I sort of liked the idea of, I sort of enjoyed prison films. I think there's something about that stuckness or incarceration that it's also been somewhat of a consistent theme in my work. A lot of my work is about being stuck or I guess in a sense, a kind of prison, be it a literal one or a surreal classroom or a town that's, sort of being, hit with climate disasters regularly. So that was the beginning of maybe me exploring those themes. And yeah, it was a funny process where I knew very early on that I felt there was something to it, where I wanted to be very ambitious with the festival strategy of the film. And so I started with very high level festivals, like the usual, like Cannes and Venice and all those. And for a couple of them, it got shortlisted and it didn't quite work out. And the release of that became a year-long process of really rejections. And even at, other even local festivals, it didn't seem to quite find a place to land. And I'd started Reptile during that and had filmed it. And it came around to the point where the Berlin submissions had opened, and that was meant to be our first festival, but we missed the cutoff. So now at the end of the process, it was a case of, well, let's give it a go. It's like the last festival. Let's just submit it and see how it goes. And we're very lucky that it ended up getting picked up. And so it really changed a lot overnight.
Yes.
It went from a film that was maybe going to show nowhere to then a film playing the biggest film festival by numbers in the world. So and what was fortunate was I'd already shot another short, so I had another one just ready to go after that. So that was the story with Grevillea. And then but shortly afterwards, we were in Berlin in February 2020, and a month later, the whole world was locked down during COVID.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, continue.
Oh, well, I was going to say as well, what was funny is it felt like a bit of a curse at the time. Like COVID and lockdown had really put the kibosh on a lot of different things. But then it sort of gave me a lot of time to edit Reptile, which was a very chaotic way of working. We worked with 16 mil. And I found a lot of people working with 16 millimeter because it's such a finite resource and so expensive. A lot of the films had to, you have to rehearse a lot and plan out the shots because you can't just shoot and shoot and shoot. But then I felt a lot of 16 mil short films had the same kind of look because they were being approached in just kind of one way. And so I went in with some expired stock actually that Amiel had donated from Hale, which was funny, and some extra stock that we managed to buy with the budget we had. And Reptile was a process of what if we shot a 16 mil short film, like an old school almost documentary where we set up the conditions and just fly into it, and we have a loose plan, but we'll see how it goes. And so it was sort of an exercise in something that felt a bit more spontaneous with a very risky format. But it made the editing very interesting because there wasn't a super clear script or shot list or plan. It was very like, how do we make something out of the footage that we've shot? And so because of COVID, I was able to spend a year and a half editing that short film, which is a little insane because it's a 16-minute film.
Are
Um,
either of these films available to watch online? Because I did search them, but I just couldn't find them, and I'm just wondering for listeners' sake if they are out there.
they're not currently,
Yes.
but it's something I'm working on. So watch
Great,
this
great.
space. Yeah.
Yes, yes. You mentioned prison films there, and your uncle's work in it. Just take us back a little bit to some of the prison films that have influenced you over the years. Have there been any in particular?
I think at the time I really was there was is it Jacques Audiard, A Prophet, the film about prison film. God, I'm really casting my mind back, but I think it was I'm pretty sure it was a French prison film from
Yes.
memory, and that was a big one. And then there was another French one actually that I can't recall the name. It's I mean, also Bresson, like A Man Escaped, and Bresson was a big influence on Grevillea, which is a film that's very gestural and very takes a lot of cues from that style of filmmaking. So those are the big ones I had in my mind. Also, like Chopper, of course. Australia has such a great history with prison films as well, and which makes a lot of sense. And recently, I really
Yes.
enjoyed Inside, so that's just continuing the tradition of that. So yeah, all those
Yeah.
films were sort of in my mind.
Yeah, and yeah, Inside's definitely one that stood out for me recently. I haven't been able to shake that film yet. It's
Yeah,
quite heavy.
yeah, it's great though. It's really amazing.
I just want to ask you quickly about the whole festival process for you. I'm speaking to a lot of filmmakers at the moment about the whole festival circuit, and some filmmakers can really take it to heart when they aren't accepted into a film festival, which I can understand. And there's a lot of frustration from their end, but at the end of the day, you also just have to be accepting of that. How long did it take for you to realize that not everything you make is going to be accepted into a festival, and when did that attitude change for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I went into it having some good advice on how to approach it and temper expectations. I had so the filmmaker I mentioned before that I produced his short, Lewis Addy, actually taught me at Swinburne, and I remember him saying about film festivals that what to expect, and he mentioned how you'll submit maybe your first short film that you seriously submit to these festivals, and they might see it, and there's probably something they really like about it, but it just doesn't fit, or there's so many submissions, very competitive, so you don't get in. But he encouraged us to just keep submitting, because maybe you'll go a second time and they like it even more, but it's still not right. But then by the time you submit for the third time, they sort of know you, and then not only that, they see how you're serious about your films, and they can see how they get better each time. And then usually it's like the third time's a charm, or fourth
Yes.
time. And it's
Yes.
all about, I think, it can feel like with the rejection you're just being dismissed, but it's actually much smaller. Even though you hear about thousands of submissions, names stick with programmers, and even though you don't get in, they still remember you. And so I think that it was a good thing for me to have in the back of my mind, not to be discouraged
Mm.
if you don't get in. I mean, another comfort is, like, a successful festival run is probably 1 in 10 festivals accepting your film, really, for the
Yes.
most part,
Yes. Yes.
which is not a high hit rate. But then it's like, if you look and you get into a couple festivals from 20 submissions, you should consider that a success.
Yes.
It's very difficult. Every festival has their own identity. They've got their own understanding of programs. I mean, there's been some really big festivals that have come back to me about really loving my short, and it's right there, and it's about to be selected, but it just didn't fit the program.
Yeah.
The program is its own thing entirely, and it goes beyond your film. It's how does it fit in the grander picture of what they want to present for the year. So
Mm. Mm.
yeah, it's easy to feel like even the word rejection is quite harsh, but it's not really. It's and I would say it shouldn't be discouraging if you don't get into a festival.
100%. Everything that you've just said there, I agree 100% with. And hopefully, if there's some emerging filmmakers out there listening, I really do hope that you take that advice on board. So let's move on to Floodland here. Considering that your filmography prior to Floodland, did consist of these two narrative short films, how easy was this decision for you to make your first feature, such a devastating documentary?
I was certainly not an easy decision. It was a lot of conversations, a lot of, yeah, I mean, especially because of my status in Lismore, I suppose, as an outsider. But I was fortunate. I mean, the reason I really know about Lismore was an ex-partner of mine. She was from Lismore. She was born and raised there, and I met her in Melbourne, and we were in a relationship, and so I learned a lot about Lismore, and ended up traveling there, and then was there shortly before the floods. I was there shortly after, and that was the real reason that the film even happened. But it was very amazing to have someone from Lismore so close to me at the time that I could talk through these things about, is this right, and and really asking the question of whether it's a story I'm sort of qualified to tell. But I think we landed on it just being a net positive, and really, because we were filming for so long, it was like, became very clear that I was almost the only outsider from Lismore that was still committed to returning there and checking in and seeing how things were developing, where largely the rest of Australia, effectively, it felt, had abandoned Lismore. So yeah, so but it was so it became a difficult decision, but it ultimately was, I think, the right one to make. And yeah, I certainly don't regret it. It was a life-changing experience.
As a documentary filmmaker, how careful and conscious do you have to be not to exploit your subjects? Because I imagine that it could be, an easy choice for some filmmakers to just dive in because they want to exploit the subject, for exposure for themselves. How conscious are you of that?
I was super conscious of it, and it was something I worried about uh, consistently, just making sure that we were approaching it in the right way and being very respectful, and not forcing anything. I mean, what's interesting is a lot of, we reached out to a lot of the people in the film, but also there's a lot of people that came to us, and that was really when I mean, I think you can feel pretty quick if someone wants to be a part of something, and if there's any sense that there's a hesitation or it might not be the best for a specific person. We just didn't pursue it. So we were very careful to really let the participants lead their involvement, and listen to their enthusiasm to be part of it, and not be too and in terms of being careful not to exploit the story. I mean, I think that goes back to even Amiel and seeing how he worked with the documentaries he's made and the people he's worked with in his films. I mean, he was really great at, I think he taught me a lot on how to approach things with the right level of care, and how to really, I think it just comes down to trust and transparency.
Yes.
And making sure that everyone involved, especially when they're offering such a vulnerable part of their life and their story, to feel like at any point, they can, they have a say in their story as well. Like, we're not going to just extract, footage and go and edit it in a certain way. I mean, everyone was pretty involved in watching back things and watching rough cuts and making sure everything that ended up in the film was something they were comfortable with.
I love hearing
so
that.
I think it's the only way. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see doing it any other way. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And I do want to ask you some questions about that and their involvement as well. But if I could just stick with Lismore for a moment, can you describe this town to listeners who haven't been there or have no idea about the town itself?
Yeah, it's. I think. I mean, my first impression is just it's very close to Byron Bay, which is, I think, a familiar image for a lot of people. So it's a very, it's subtropical. It's very humid, and it's a sort of a place for artists and alternative lifestyles, but also farmers, and it's such a melting pot of Australian culture and totally disparate people getting along. And I think it's also molded by, the difficult history with flooding. It creates a sense of cohesion and solidarity amongst, people who, in the city might never even talk to each other, like in cities like, where I'm from and, elsewhere. But they have like a shared collective experience that really binds them, which I thought created a really strong community that was really beautiful. And yeah, it's a really alive place. It's it's a super beautiful area. for, I sort of say for 99% of the time, it's like one of the most beautiful places on earth. But then there's just that 1% of, when a flood comes by that,
It's a nightmare.
You're listening to the Cinema Australia podcast on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or at cinemaaustralia.com.au.
Is the narrative of this final product that we're seeing now what you had originally set out to make, or did it develop and shape itself along the way?
It definitely developed my original approach, and it's because I hadn't yet really met the people that ended up being in the film. It was very conceptual. It was almost essayistic in its approach, but then as soon as I met Eli and Harper and Carly and was seeing their story, it really became clear that I had all these conceptual ideas about the history and about the climate crisis and how it was being represented there. But then I realized really the story is about the people living through all of that and how all those things intersect through the lived experience of everyone in Lismore, and how it manifests in different ways and how different people reckon with that. That all slowly developed very organically, over the, sort of 3 years that we were filming.
So how exactly did Eli, Harper, Carly, Jensen and Jess's involvement come about in the film?
Well, I'd met a lot of people that had wanted to be a part or help out, and felt that making a project like this was important. And then I think, Eli was very active on local community Facebook groups that I was added to. So a lot of communication about Lismore and information was being passed along through Facebook groups, these closed Facebook groups that community members, were a part of. And I would see a lot of videos from Eli, who he was documenting his story. And he felt like someone who really wanted his story to be told. And so, and at the time, he was really wanting to save Lismore and stay in Lismore and find a way to remain there. And a lot of people I talked to were talking about moving the town, or how they have to abandon it or rethink it. And I thought, there's something very interesting about someone who is so adamant about staying even after what he'd been through, that I was very fascinated to hear, where he was coming from. And I think, to see how that develops throughout the film, and how his thinking changes over the course of his recovery and the different stages of the town's recovery, sort of became the film. But that's how I came to Eli. Harper was very politically active. And I think it was really Eli suggesting that we talk to Harper. So that's how we met Harper. And then someone else within the community took me and the crew to the Healing Hub in Lismore, and that's where we met Carly. And because it's so close knit, everyone knows everyone. It sort of became,
it feels like it.
It became very much like, you should talk to this person or that person. And so it all just was like this network, and that's why it kind of becomes a bit of a network narrative, because that's sort of how it was made. It was like, so that was really how we found everyone that is in the film.
And Carly is credited as a writer on the film. How did that attribution come about? Because I guess this story really couldn't have been told without an Indigenous voice, right?
Yeah, it would have been impossible. I mean, I remember there was a process where, in documentary, there's this weird process where you have to write the script, even though you haven't, the story's not over. So you have to almost invent a story or where it's heading. And I came up to the point where I had to write really from Carly's character's point of view and talk about that history. And I just couldn't write a word, like nothing. I could not form a sentence that felt genuine or authentic, or like it just felt like there's no way I can do this without Carly. And and thankfully Carly was very open to being part of that process. And so her involvement was just a lot of Zoom calls and sharing the writing and asking her for her part, how she and wanted that story to be told, and taking her lead on a lot of those themes, because I think the film wouldn't have been the same without it. But it just felt like the most vital as well, to hear from really the Bundjalung perspective, because it underpins everything. I think in Lismore, how it started and what some people are still struggling to maybe accept today.
Yes, yeah. I mean, these people were warned, decades and decades ago, right?
Exactly, yeah. Which is almost for me. I think I'd heard a lot about Lismore, and then I think when I heard that, that was really the point where I was thinking that there's a really important story to be told. So that was maybe the true catalyst for the project.
Yeah, you've done such a good job at balancing that side of the story into this and integrating it here. So congratulations on that part, especially. I think, Carly's voice, as I said, I don't think this film could have been told without it. I might be guilty of asking this question too often to my podcast guests, and especially when it's about a documentary, but I don't ask it out of laziness. I ask it out of a fascination with the different answers that I'm given. But you've managed to capture the most intimate and raw moments of these people's struggles. How did you go about gaining their trust? Or was it a matter of them just being so exhausted that they were willing to open up and share, everything about themselves just because someone was willing to listen?
I think it varied, but I think it was just there was no rushing it. I think it was just and letting everyone know that they didn't need to share anything that they didn't want to, and just giving them the space to I think just trying to create the safest environment possible. And it's fascinating. I mean, there were times where people were like Eli specifically was sharing stories, and it became very difficult. And I called for us to cut, and he protested that and was like, "No, I'll keep filming. I want you to keep filming, and I want to keep talking about it." And so, it was really just letting everyone being a part of it know to take the lead, and to give them agency over telling their story. I suppose it's like we were simply there as a conduit for that, and so there was we just asked questions, and I mean, there's plenty of things like for Harper. There was a lot that there's so much we could say about Harper and how amazing his story is. But that didn't either feel relevant or that Harper wasn't comfortable sharing, and we just respected that. So in terms of building the trust, I think it's just about not. You build trust maybe by just being there and just showing how committed you are, and then by just constantly being patient and not forcing anything. It also helped. We were such a small crew. I mean, a lot of the shoot was just me, the DP Benita, the sound recorder Josh, and it was so small. It was like a family. Like every shoot was the same people, and so the trust was built because they got to know us just as we got to know them. So I think there's a saying like the best documentaries are the best relationships. And I think we all built our relationship with the participants, and that's sort of how we were able to I guess capture that stuff.
You've captured it so well, and I'm just thinking of Eli here. He is quite a softly spoken guy. He's very placid, and he's very quiet. Yet he's also the loudest of the lot. When you really think about the stories that he's telling and the struggles that he's sharing, it is almost like he's screaming through the camera for people to listen and help the town.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, and I think he really embodies the frustration that a lot of people in Lismore felt and are still feeling about a lack of real change or action. And, it's sort of that, it is sort of insane to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. And so, I think that's sort of where Eli was coming from. I mean, he truly, being born and raised there, I mean, he's lived it his whole life. And I guess it getting worse and worse, you sort of do reach a breaking point.
Yeah. From what you've witnessed yourself over the years, what would you say has been the biggest political incompetence when it comes to the flooding in Lismore?
It's a difficult question.
Yes.
There's a few different things to choose from, I guess. The sort of maybe the short-sightedness of how the town was developed in the first place, but also there's the inspiration was to set up really a port town to sustain the timber industry, which ended up, decimating the big scrub rainforest, which basically doesn't exist anymore. And but what's interesting is a rainforest and the roots of that kind of vegetation holds floodwaters. It's like sponges, as I understand it. And so when you remove that and just put down pastures for dairy land or dairy farms, which was the industry that came afterwards, now all of a sudden the water that collects in these valleys, there's nothing holding it in, so the floods get worse because it just becomes like smooth terrain that it can just move through. All that kind of stuff. I think it's so complicated. It's not necessarily even one thing. It's like the Earth's climate is like one of the most complicated systems in the world. It's like, and all these things contributed to making it worse and worse. The situation there.
Throughout the film, we see some of Harper's speeches, at some of these town hall type events. Is anyone doing as much research into Lismore's issues than Harper is?
Harper's a pretty motivated guy. I mean, he's dived so deep into a lot of this stuff, and so he's certainly up there with one of the most well-read people on the subject. Of course, there's a lot of experts that have looked into it, but in terms of like someone who's actually living there, I think that's what makes Harper special is that he's doing the research, but he's also living in it. Whereas, it's a different story than someone maybe in Sydney who's researching it from a very scientific angle that has its value, but doesn't know the how that plays into the lived experience of Lismore.
And what a gift Harper was to this film.
Yeah, I feel like everyone involved is such a gift, but particularly Harper with I was so interested in the political side, and so to have someone that could speak to that, but also speak to having gone through the floods, it was just such a he just encapsulated so much, and it was amazing to tie that political story to a very personal story as well, because I think that's how you get people to really connect. If it was just talking heads of politicians and just sort of describing facts and it wouldn't be nearly as interesting, or the stakes wouldn't be nearly as high.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you a few questions from a more technical perspective here, and I know you have spoken about it briefly there. So how many crew were involved on the ground throughout the making of Floodland over the 3 years, did you say?
Yeah. It's a good question. For most of the time, it was just a crew of 3. It was me, Benita, and Josh, who were I was directing, and it was like camera and sound. That was the bulk of the crew. Later, I had I was fortunate enough to be able to bring the project to Sweet Shop and Green, or now Mofa Stories. So to have their support and to get the support through their help through Screen Australia and Big Screen, and get funding to really see the project through it and make it what it could be. That the crew expanded a little bit. So we had a great co-writer, Joseph Nazzetti, who worked on River and some other amazing projects. He was involved. He came to a couple of shoots, and as a co-writer was able to also participate in interviews and so that was amazing. We also had Hugh Miller, who shot some amazing projects. He shot a couple of the shoots later on in the project, a local sound recorder. So it was mostly a unit of 3, and then later, luckily after the trusses had been built and getting more support, we were able to expand it out a little bit more and really achieve its full potential.
Mm-hmm. Talk us through some of the equipment needed for a documentary like this, where you are just expected to kind of jump up and start shooting at any time.
I really don't think you need a lot. I think you just need camera and sound. I would argue sound, that's sort of a cliche, but sound is even more important. Just a really good DP, a really good sound recorders. I find that's what, if you have that, you can make a documentary. There were some shoots where Benita wasn't able to join us, so I was filming, and and that worked. But I don't know if I could have done it the other way, where I was doing the sound. I mean, sound was crucial for, and I think is crucial for documentary, because so much comes from interviews, but also things just caught in situ, or as you're walking down a street, and you're just talking casually, but as you're moving to another location, but the lab's on, and then they say something like, "That was amazing, can we put it in?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, sure." It's so yeah, I would say you don't need a lot, and I think that goes for a lot of films, not just documentary.
Yeah. I'm not sure how relevant this question is now, because you've just mentioned there that there wasn't a heap of equipment, but you are filming in a lot of rain here. Was there ever a risk to any of the equipment that you were using?
Oh sure, but
Yeah.
but what's a project without a bit of risk,
Yes.
but sometimes it was like, just put a rain jacket over the camera and hope for the best. Luckily, no equipment was damaged or broken, but yeah, I mean, certainly it's a consideration. I mean, there are other shoots we had proper, camera rain kits. Proper, it was sort of plastic that had been gaffer taped into a sort of, rig and draped over the camera. But look, we made it work. I think sometimes you just got to be at the mercy of the elements and hope for the best.
Yes. And speaking of risk, you and the crew are entering some dangerous locations here, that have been affected by floods. Was there ever a time that you felt like your safety was at risk at all?
Not really. I think the worst is, some houses had mold, which is obviously can be very nasty, but, obviously short-term exposure, like you walk into a room and it's got mold, you just sort of walk out and, or you don't really stay in a house like that. There were some places that, I think for the most part, I mean, everything we walked into, we were aware of, the history. So, there were some houses that we didn't go into because it would have asbestos. There were other houses that had the asbestos removed, so it was safe. So we were very careful. Obviously, I mean, we didn't really just like go into houses. It was always like somewhat we knew the person who,
Yes.
So we kind of got permission, and because of that, you could kind of tell what you were walking into. But it is a disaster zone. I mean, it's that's another huge ongoing effect is the health and safety of the fallout of a disaster like that. I mean, there was a lot, but it's hard for me to complain. I was going there as filming for a few days, or like a week every 3 months. I mean, there's people that are living there, so it's really difficult. I can't, I think I didn't get the worst of it for sure, and neither did the crew. But we were very cautious. You have to be. We had to be.
I'm hoping that you can talk us through one of the creative choices that you've made in this film. It's one of the more interesting creative choices, and that's the opening sequence of the film and that particular song choice. It's so perfect in creating the illusion that Lismore is this wonderland, which quickly turns into a nightmare. Can you talk to us about that song choice in particular?
Yeah, I mean, for me, music's always been so important in films, and it's something I really value. And I think it's easy for music for some to be sort of an afterthought, and it's complementary to the project. And if it's a sad scene, what's a song that's going to make us feel sad? But I think there's so much potential in how you can use music to really elevate the feeling and communicate something, in a way that's very I guess intuitive for an audience. You can create a really interesting feeling, and I think, it's using that opening to create this feeling of a sense of this fairy tale place, which I think is sort of how Eli begins. How he thought about Lismore. For most of his life, it's like this. He calls it a paradise, and I believe it. I mean, I was there before the 2022 floods, like 3 months before, and it felt like a paradise. But then after the floods, it's like, how do you hold those two truths? That yes, it's a paradise for almost all of the time there, but then something so devastating could turn it upside down. So I think that music cue was trying to set up that contrast to help maybe understand and put yourself in the shoes of someone like Eli who really loves it, but then has to confront a really hard truth about it.
Did it take much to get the rights to use the song, or is that something that's in the public domain?
No, I mean the music licensing is split into two. It's the writing of the actual the copyright of the writing, and then
Yeah.
the recording. The writing, I think, of the music was public domain, but the
Yes.
recording, luckily, it's such a well-known cue that there were different orchestras. So I think the original one was a bit
Ah.
difficult, but then you
Yeah.
just find. I bet it was a blessing because I found what I thought ended up being a better recording anyway by a small orchestra, which by virtue of it being smaller, it's cheaper. And so, I mean, classicals are really safe and somewhat easy thing to license,
Yeah.
very difficult thing to re-record and, pay an orchestra. But yeah, I mean, the licensing was, there was a few tracks that were licensed. And I mean, the big one was the Roy Orbison one at the end of the film.
Yes.
Yeah, which I don't know, maybe spoilers or something. But yeah, that was, we were very lucky with that. That could very easily have been just, completely blown out the budget and been impossible to get. But we got lucky.
Oh, I'd love to hear it. So, would you say that this whole experience has made you want to make more documentaries? Is this an area that you want to continue to explore now, or are you looking forward to diving into a more narrative feature film?
I think for me, narrative is where I want to go next. But I'd love to make another documentary. But I think I wanted to, when I started filmmaking, I think narrative was something I wanted to go into initially. But I feel like I don't, maybe for better or worse, strategize my projects. It just feels as though I'll just, I'll like court ideas, and then eventually I'll be like, no, I need to make this film. Like this is the only thing that's important. And the story of Lismore was like, just drop everything that I'm doing and I have to make this. It just felt so important that but I think the next step for me will be narrative. But hopefully make another documentary as well. Like I'd like to do both. Which how great would that be? But it's
Would there be a particular topic that you'd love to focus on?
There's a few different things. I think I'm trying to think about what I'm working on now and if there are any specific topics that stand out.
You don't have to give anything away.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's too early. I'm very cautious about pitching things too early because so I'll leave it at that. But watch this space.
I've got a final question here for you that I like to ask all my podcast guests to wrap things up. But have you seen any Australian films lately that have really stood out for you, and anything that you've enjoyed?
It probably would be Inside. That's like a very recent one I've seen, and I thought it was amazing. So that's got to be my answer, I think.
As I said, it's a film, a very hard film to shake, that's for sure. And after seeing it a year ago, I'm still thinking about it now. Was there anything in particular about that film that you really, really liked?
Oh, it just stays with you.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, maybe the that sort of paternal relationship triangle that is in the film is sort of, I love films like that, I guess. I thought, it had a great, psychological tension between the three main characters that I thought was really well written, really well acted. I mean, also just the aesthetic of it, and I believe it was shot in 16mm. I thought it looked great as well, and it did so much with like a very, obviously prisons are very limiting, but it found a way to do so much with that subject and genre. That to me was what I found really impressive about it.
Well, Jordan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you as a guest of the Cinema Australia podcast. I can't thank you enough for your time and for sharing your stories. So thanks again, and congratulations on the film.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening. Find all the latest Australian film news at cinemaaustralia.com.au. You can follow Cinema Australia on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok.